Standing Order 1082, the committee will now study the subject matter of the Supplementary Estimate C for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2018, and the interim estimates for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2019. I'd like to welcome the Honorable Seamus O'Regan, Minister of Veterans Affairs, General Retired Walter Nitinchuk, Deputy Minister of Department of Veterans Affairs. Welcome, Minister. Thanks for coming today, and we'll start with 10 minutes.
Okay. Chairman Ellis, fellow members of Parliament, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs today. I am always glad to meet with you because I know that we share the same goal, supporting the veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces and their families. Our shared mandate is to ensure that Canada lives up to its obligations to provide them with the support, care, respect, and economic opportunities they have earned through their service to their country. Before I go on, I also want to say thank you to this committee for your hard work in ensuring that we live up to this promise. Notre mandat commun est de veiller.
Our common mandate is to make sure that Canada meets its obligations to provide care, support, respect, and economic opportunities that our veterans deserve because of their service to our country. Before continuing, I would also like to thank the committee for its hard work to make sure that we keep that promise.
I was a newly appointed minister, and a lot has changed since, including December's announcement of the Pension for Life. It will become another integral part of the package that we provide for the well-being of our veterans. Pension for Life provides 3 new benefits. The pain and suffering compensation recognizes and compensates veterans for the pain and suffering they experience as a result of service-related disability. Additional pain and suffering compensation will be provided for those with severe and permanent service-related impairments, causing a barrier to reestablishment in life after service. Veterans will be able to choose to receive those as tax-free monthly payments for life or as a single non-taxable lump sum, whichever is right for them and their family. The second component of the Pension for Life is the income replacement benefit that will provide up to 90% of the veteran's salary at the time of release from the Canadian Armed Forces for veterans. This is for veterans who face barriers to reestablishment caused by health problems resulting primarily from service. Ces combattants seront combinés avec les.
These benefits will be combined with the social benefits under the new Charter for Veterans in order to provide better support for veterans who are ill or wounded as they undertake their life after the military.
Increased the amount of the disability award, and as of December, veterans received $650 million. You can see that increase reflected throughout Veterans Affairs Vote 5 in 2017-18's main estimates and throughout this year's supplementary estimates for the Department. We also increased the earnings loss benefit, which veterans receive while in rehabilitation, to 90% of their pre-release salary. We reopened the 9 offices closed by the previous government and opened a new office in Surrey, as well as expanded outreach to veterans in Northern Canada. And we hired more staff. Going live in 2 weeks are our Budget 2017 initiatives, including the Education and Training Benefit, Career Transition Services, Veterans Emergency Fund, Caregiver Recognition Benefit, the expansion of our successful Military Family Resource Center pilot, the Veteran and Family Wellbeing Fund, the Center of Excellence on PTSD and Mental Health, and the elimination of a time limit on rehabilitation services and vocational assistance program. I look forward to reporting back throughout the year on the progress in each of these. The key to these benefits and programs is how we deliver them. Since December, I've had the opportunity to meet with hundreds of veterans, their families, and serving CAF members at town hall meetings. I can tell you how we deliver services, and in many cases, how services are not being delivered, comes up loudly, and it comes up often, and for good reason. When here last, I spoke about this committee's reports, Reaching Out, Improving Service Delivery to Canadian Veterans, and Mental Health of Canadian Veterans, A Family Purpose. Many of your recommendations corresponded with what Veterans Affairs' own Service Delivery Review identified as key areas of need. I
also said that the department had an action plan to carry out those recommendations. among the 91 concrete measures that we are putting in place to improve veterans' lives, we have responded to over half of them. And I am committed to continuing with their implementation through 2020-21.
Fundamental changes to the way that Veterans Affairs works. The most significant one is completely turning around the approach to delivering service. Previously, it was up to the veteran to apply for benefits and services. Our Service Delivery Review report called this the pull model. The problem with it was that veterans often did not have enough information to be able to ask the questions that would enable them to apply for benefits. Again, this is something that has come up over and over again with the veterans that I meet. So we flipped that to a push model. Now, Veterans Affairs staff take the initiative to give veterans all the information they need about the services that they're eligible for. Let me just take a moment to tell you a little more about that. This month, the department is wrapping up a 6-month pilot called Guided Support. The program assigned a veteran service agent to be the main point of contact at the department for a veteran. The agent gets to know the veteran, their family situation, and their needs, and then determines what programs, benefits, and services they're eligible for. The agent helps the veteran navigate through the department's application and delivery service and coordinate services. The reactions of participants in the pilot study have been very encouraging. Veterans and families like the fact that they only had to communicate with one person at the department. They appreciate the support they received in learning about services and benefits and in filling out the right forms to apply for them. Les agents des services aux vétérans.
The Veterans Service officers were also enthusiastic because they were able to visit veterans at home, get to know them better, and develop a plan that was tailored to their individual needs. We are now preparing to provide a support standard for all veterans who don't need just a management officer but need help.
Benefits and services, and to the way it delivers them, are having an impact right now on the lives of veterans and their families today. It's not only through the pilot project that veterans are getting more and better information about the services and benefits they're entitled to. The whole department is adopting the push model. They have made significant progress in improving communications to veterans, families, advocates, and stakeholders, whether in person, by phone, over the internet, or even by mail. As a result of these efforts, the number of applications for disability benefits has increased 32% over the past 2 years. We will ensure that every veteran that comes forward receives what they're entitled to, whether 10 veterans or 10,000. I am here today in regards to Supplementary Estimates C. As you can see, Veterans Affairs Canada is seeking $45 million in increased operating expenditures and $132 million in grants and contributions. Our programs are driven by demand, which is why the bulk of these supplementary estimates will pay for benefits and programs that go directly to veterans and their families and caregivers. They also include increases to disability awards and allowances, a doubling of the critical injury benefit, money for educational assistance for children of deceased members or veterans, payments for housekeeping and grounds maintenance for veterans, and funding for treatment benefits and operational stress injury clinics. Chairman Ellis, members of the Standing Committee, we share a common goal to ensure that Canada's veterans get the support and services that they need. Veterans Affairs Canada is working hard to enhance the well-being of veterans and their families, with more improvements in the coming fiscal year and the re-establishment of a monthly lifetime pension option in 2019, we are making real progress. With the support of this committee, we can continue to do that. Avec d'autres améliorations.
With other improvements that are planned over the next fiscal year and the implementation of our pension for life in 2019, we are making real progress. With the support of this committee, we will be able to continue that progress. Thank you very much.
Begin our first round of questioning with 6 minutes rounds. I asked the committee to have patience today with time. We have another group, so I will be running tight for time on everybody. We'll start with Mr. McComan, 6 minutes.
Thank you for being here, Minister. According to a report out of, I've got a copy of it here. I'm glad to share it with you. The Globe and Mail published last week. Tuesday, March the 13th. Two issues were brought forward in this article. The one I want to refer to is one brought forward and quoted by the veterans, Mr. Forbes, who is the head of the Veterans Associations of Canada. And I'll quote, "According to Mr. Forbes, the new pensions for life will pay a maximum of $3,650 a month to the most severely disabled vets, while the Pension Act pays as much as $7,444 to qualified disabled vets who retired before 2016. Mr. O'Regan has said there is little disparity between the two programs, but Mr. Forbes says the numbers prove that the minister is misinformed. The commitment to restore the pensions for life has been the subject of veterans' expectations for the past 3 years, Mr. Forbes said. But the pensions announced by the Liberal government didn't come close to closing the gap. Quote, he said, we take the view that the commitment has been basically unfulfilled. What is your reaction to Mr. Forbes?
I would say he's wrong.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next question. This one is in the same article, actually, and it's that veterans are complaining that the new education and training benefit does not match what was promised in the days leading before the 2015 election. And veterans groups are saying, quote, pensions for life were also part of that Liberal platform and are paying much less. This is a quote from Sean Brewer, a veterans advocate, who says politicians need to stop expecting veterans who swoon over empty political promises. And it goes on to say that your leader, the Prime Minister, said, we'll cover the cost of 4 years of post-secondary education for every veteran who wants one. The article goes on to talk about the fact that this is actually not happening, that it's not available to all veterans. Can you speak to that?
Sure. I mean, the education benefit is available to those who fall under the new Veterans Charter. So that would be those veterans who have made a claim from 2006 onward. And I am incredibly proud of the education benefit because it is exceedingly generous. It is $40,000 for 6 years of service, and at 12 years of service, $80,000. And it's a grant. It allows veterans complete and utter flexibility in what they want to study. It can be anything and at an institution of their choosing. And it covers not just tuition, but it also covers room and board, it covers books, it covers everything associated with their education. And in fact, upon graduation, it also includes a small bonus or reward, graduation bonus of $1,000. But it gives them another lease on life, and it also is the flexibility of them being able to choose to do it anytime within 10 years after they leave. So if they change their mind,
the
they can do
question
something
was,
else.
is it available to all veterans? And you said no, just the ones after the new Veterans Charter.
2006.
So it's not available to all veterans as the promise was made.
It's for those under the new Veterans
For the
Charter.
promise that was made in 2015 on the election campaign said it will be available to all veterans, but it's not.
Well, there is an educational benefit that is available under
No, full
under the system.
education, sir. No, can I correct?
It's quite a good benefit
Go back
under
to the
system.
quote? It's about 4 years of fully paid education is not available to all veterans, and thank you for answering that. Let's move on to my third question, or my third comment and question, and the third one comes from a recent study done by the National Association of Federal Retirees, and they developed a Veterans Outreach Initiative in 2017 in order to determine what has and what has not been working for veterans. Under this report, under the title of Respect, their 2018 report says there were 2 areas where veterans noted a feeling of lack of respect when dealing with VAC, feeling that they had to fight for benefits, and some interactions with VAC staff. Many felt that processes were intentionally difficult to discourage applications or deny benefits. While interactions with VAC staff were generally positive when they occurred, there were several instances where veterans identified the staff had treated them poorly. If you're doing all that you can, why are veterans still feeling disrespected?
Yeah, I mean, that is a tough question. We are attempting to change the culture. Upon the time that I was appointed minister, I think 1 day or 2 days afterwards, the deputy and I went right to Charlottetown to speak to the bulk of the employees, I guess, who would work at VAC, who would be in Charlottetown, and said, we do want to change the culture here. It was a culture, as I described in my opening remarks, as a pull culture, so that it was really kind of left to the veterans to find what programs and services were available to them. And we did want to create what we call a push culture. In other words, we're going to tell you everything that you should be entitled to, and to do that in a pleasant and an effective way. You know, I am, and I think I told this committee before, I am impatient by nature. And let me tell you, in the town halls that we have been doing across the country since the beginning of January, and we just got back from Edmonton where we did five meetings in total, 2 full town halls, there is nothing that will hold your feet to the fire, with all due respect to this committee, than having a veteran stand at a mic and tell you, I'm not getting the services I need.
Mr. Sampson, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Minister and Deputy. It's nice to see you here today, and gives us an opportunity to get the facts straight, if you want, from the Minister and the Deputy. I'd like to begin with maybe giving you a second to finish answering the question that was posed about the education support under the old charter. If you wanted to maybe expand on that.
Yeah, let's talk about, Walt, I'm going to get you to maybe expand on it. This is available under VOC Rehab, and it's up to $75,000, so it is a fair amount.
Right. So just to be clear, that the new education and training benefit is open to members of the Canadian Armed Forces who release either voluntarily, medically, or on retirement. And so those who have released from 1 April 2006, if they have 6 years of service, they would be eligible for up to $40,000, as the Minister indicated, for tuition, for books, for living expenses. 12 years of service, they would be eligible for up to $80,000 for, again, tuition, books, and living expenses. This is on top of, for those members of the Canadian Armed Forces who have been released medically or who have a disability with Veterans Affairs, that they would have up to $78,000, I think is the current amount, $78,000 for their VOC rehab education, training, and reestablishment in society. And it really, when the Minister and I were out in Edmonton speaking to one veteran who was, I believe, an ordinary seaman, and he was going through his PhD in psychology based on the existing vocational rehab education benefit. So this education and training benefit is on top of this vocational rehab program right now. So again, if any veteran, no matter where they are, but if they have a claim under the new Veterans Charter, and we have many veterans who are both clients under the old Pension Act as well as under the new Veterans Charter, question of when they came forward with their disability, that if they require additional assistance to reestablish themselves in society, they would come under this VOC rehab program.
Thank you. Minister, I'd also like to, maybe you could expand on the supplementary estimates that shows an additional $177 million in funding for Veteran Affairs. Can you speak on why we're seeing that increase and what the funding is for?
In total, let me see, I'm just going to get the breakdown on it. Do you want to speak to it immediately while I find the rest of it?
So, sir, as part of the 177, the 45 million goes into the operations fund because we used part of that operations fund for treatment benefits. So it's an indication, this is based upon the needs of veterans. So more veterans have come forward in terms of treatment medications, but also in terms of the usage of the operational stress injury clinics. We have seen a significant increase in the clientele using the operational stress injury clinics across the country. And so we're monitoring that and ensuring that we reinforce the support, working with the health authorities across the country. And then the second amount, about $132 million, that goes to the grants contributions, which is an indication of the increased number of veterans coming forward for the disability awards. And therefore, this is based upon our forecast, which goes to the whole premise of our funding, which is a quasi-statutory obligation. We monitor the usage or the requirement by veterans and are able to come back to government and ask for additional top-ups as we see the trend throughout the year.
Thank you. Minister, I'd also like to share with you that many, many veterans that I've spoken to in my riding and in the province of Nova Scotia are very, very happy with the budget line that indicates the expense credit for service dog. This is something that was asked for many, many years, veterans with PTSD especially. And I know my colleague in my riding, Medrick Casino, who walked from Nova Scotia to Ottawa and wrote a book about service dog and been a strong advocate. And I tell you that he's extremely happy, as many, many others are. Just to finish, if I have a second, is throughout the town halls, you spoke about your various town halls since you've been appointed. What's the feedback you're getting on all these extra benefits? Because there's major benefits. You just indicated in your introduction about the key benefits that's taking place as we start 2018. What's the feedback? Are they aware of these benefits, and how are they feeling?
I'll be absolutely honest with you. I think that the biggest issue is just nobody likes a lot of change at once. And so on the upside, we are putting more money, a lot more money, more programming and more services than they've seen in a long time. But it's a lot. So it can be overwhelming for some of them. So we find that town halls are the most effective to kind of just tell the narrative. And one thing that I came to the conclusion of Engage Town was that it's tough because you're not telling a simple story. And it is not one size fits all anymore. We know that, and that's why all the parties in Parliament came to the conclusion, along with the Legion and other groups, that the Pension Act had to change. And the new Veterans Charter came into place. Because we know now, we have a much better understanding of the challenges, both mental and physical, but especially mental nowadays, that veterans face, the need for vocational rehab, the need for stronger programs and services. And now we also have the ability to tailor those to the individual needs of every veteran, which means that to a complex question, you have a complex solution, which makes for a complex story. And politically, it's not as easy to tell that tale, but it's necessary. And when you tell it that way, they get it.
Thank you.
Mr. Johns?
Thank you, Minister, for being here, and Deputy Minister. My question, as we know, the new Pension for Life option that is part of the planned spending in the 2018-2019 budget could cost as much as $3.6 billion. This is a significant sum of money, but I think it's quite a bit less than what was promised to veterans by the party that is now part of your party. The 2015 Liberal Party platform said, and I quote, "We will reestablish lifelong pensions as an option for our injured veterans." So your party's document refers to the old lifelong pension that existed before the implementation of the new Veterans Charter. That is why the term reinstate was used and not end state or create. So the word was reestablish as it was before. It was clear and unequivocal language. So now, as we know, in a town hall meeting in Edmonton on February 1st, the Prime Minister made the admission that your government was still fighting veterans who are seeking the reinstatement of the lifelong pension in court, quote, because they're asking for more than we're able to give right now, end quote. So my question is specific to only direct payments made to veterans, no other services or programs, just the direct monthly payments to veterans. If the old lifelong pension regime was actually reinstated, as the Liberal Party promised to do, as it promised it would do, as your leader and you promised to do in the election, Minister, then how much more would it have cost compared to the watered-down lifetime pension program that you're actually delivering now?
I would disagree with the member. I mean, what we said that we would do is that we would bring back a monthly payment option. In fact, I kind of wish we didn't say option all the time, but we do, because technically that's true. There are a number of veterans who are later in life who, the lump sum payment makes more sense for them financially. But we are nudging people, and this will nudge people towards a monthly amount. And we believe it needs to be monthly because there was something that didn't ring true to a lot of Canadians and obviously to a lot of veterans about the lump sum amount and that being the only option available. And that was, it's a lot of money, let's say, for a 25 or 30-year-old veteran coming out of Afghanistan suddenly to take on. I mean, if that's the only amount that you get, and
you're saying that it's the same amount. You're saying that it's the same amount as that was promised before 2006.
Actually, it builds on the point that I was making earlier.
Just straight up payments. Is it more or is it less?
This gets exactly to the point that I was saying earlier, that more increasingly
just asking for a simple question,
and I'm
yes
giving
or no?
you a very complicated answer,
Yeah,
which is
you
that
are.
for
and
every
I think that the
individual
complicated
veteran,
answer is not ending up.
It will depend on their circumstances.
Minister, I've got a friend here, Mark Campbell. He served alongside Paul Franklin. Same injuries, same war, old system, and totally different benefits. and there's a 40% difference when it comes to payments. Minister, maybe you can explain. It's just a simple question. Why are they getting less than somebody who fought in the same battle?
It really depends on the individual involved, sir. I mean, I can only say it so many times. There are some that will fall under the Pension Act of 1919, and there are some that will fall under the new Veterans Charter.
This isn't what they were promising, what they expected,
Pension for Life, we are
Minister.
giving a monthly pension for those who are unable to work, who are unable to reestablish themselves in society. That in almost every case they will do more.
I just wish the government would just be more forthcoming
than
and
the
just.
Pension Act of
I
1919.
wish the government would be more forthcoming and just
Have a conversation as opposed to arguing over each other, please.
Great. Next question. In a letter to this committee, your department has stated that, and I quote, there are approximately 29,000 pending disability benefit applications, first applications, reassessment, and departmental reviews. Of the 29,000 pending in the queue, approximately 9,000 applications, first applications, reassessments, and departmental reviews are over the service standard. Your government has now committed $42.8 million over 2 years to address the backlog in processing the increased number of claims. Was this dollar amount, $42.8 million over the 2 years, the amount that was officially requested by experts in the department to resolve the backlog?
It is very difficult for us to gauge, to be honest with you, how much it will cost in order for us to absorb that backlog. And also, to be honest with you, you only have the capacity to absorb so much money. We only have so many people trained and ready to go at any one time. I mean, I'll allow the deputy to speak further on it, but I mean, certainly, we were very pleased with that amount. It is not going to happen quick enough for my liking, or frankly for the liking of anybody, of one of those 9,000 people who are waiting an abnormal amount of time for the benefits and services that they're entitled to.
So I know you're saying that it's not enough money to do that, but we know that this won't. Will this eliminate the backlog? Do you believe that this amount of money will eliminate the backlog?
Well, the head of the union says it's definitely in the right direction, and it gives us a huge good start, I guess.
It was my understanding that they needed double to actually get it to zero. So, I mean, that's...
I have not seen, Mr. Johns, a figure that would ever put us at zero.
So what is the figure to get us to zero? There must be a number that you should be able to...
I'm not aware of any number. I just know that the 42.8 gives us a good start.
Okay. The question, the last question I have, and I think I'm running out of time. So, we know that we had 4,000 staff working in VAC in 2012. There was significant cuts under the Conservative government. 1,000 jobs were lost. You've rehired. We're still looking at about 600 short when we do the math. When are we going to? And you're introducing new programs, and we can't keep up with the programs that we're dealing with now before implementing new programs. How many staff do you forecast we need to be able to deal with the backlog and implement the new programs?
Right now we are focused on retraining, those staff who are available and who have the experience to best handle new programs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Lambropoulos.
Thank you for being with us once again to answer our questions about the budget. So my first question for you, as we all know, when a veteran is in his or her transition period after service, often it's a time of it's a difficult time, one of the most difficult times. They feel extremely vulnerable, and a potential crisis can occur. Can you speak to us a little bit more about the Veterans Emergency Fund and just tell us how it's going to be different from what was offered in the past?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Firstly, it allows us flexibility that we didn't have before. What's interesting when I first came on as minister is that, even though you're talking about a big department that dispenses billions of dollars in programs and services and has thousands of people in its employ, you actually have very little flexibility in being able to take some money and help somebody out immediately. I mean, that's some consolation to taxpayers knowing that every dollar is watched, but it means that you don't have the flexibility to act very quickly. So before this emergency fund, and in fact, present day, we rely upon bequeathments, people who have left money in their estates, for instance, and set up dedicated funds to help, for instance, homeless veterans. But even then, it might be very particular, i.e. like it might be for a particular city or a particular province or under only particular circumstances. So it doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility. This will, so that when we know that someone's in need, we can just immediately, for instance, get them off the street. and put them and give them the shelter that they need while we assess what programs and services may be available. Do you want to take it a little further?
Just to reinforce what the minister indicated, the funding that we have today is all kind of tied to the eligibility of the veteran. When we know the veteran had an injury as a result of service, then we can dispense funds. And as the minister indicated, up to now we've been able to use some of the charitable funds that have been given to the department. We have 23 different funds. Like one fund can only be used for those veterans at St. Anne's Hospital. One can only be used at Sunnybrook. One can only be used on Vancouver Island. So we've also partnered with the Canadian Armed Forces and got great support from the Canadian Armed Forces from their Morale and Welfare Fund. As of 1st of April, for the first time, we will actually have public funds that we can dispense to support a veteran in crisis even before we've established their eligibility. So if a veteran comes to us, no matter when they come to us, we can actually dispense funds to put a roof over their heads, put groceries on their table, provide them support as we figure out who they are, what their eligibility is, and move them along. Mindful that we're working constantly across the country with organizations such as the Royal Canadian Legion, Vets Canada, Soldiers for Soldiers, and so on, because it really is a partnership with all of these not-for-profits and the communities, and a lot of great support from the communities as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And I guess at this point, I've heard a lot about the Pension for Life option, and I've seen in a way what's being included, but can you just speak to it a little bit more and give us more details as to what we can expect being implemented as of April 2018?
I think what ultimately you're getting is financial stability for people, so that they have not only just the monthly amount that they will receive, but also that tie to the government and to, almost the people of Canada that says, thank you very much for what you did. There was a feeling with the lump sum that not only were you taking on a lot more money than some people can handle and expected that it would last you for the course of your life, but you were being written off the ledger. You're done. Mm-hmm. We don't need to deal with you anymore. And I think, that's what we heard time and again for veterans. And that's what they were looking for. So now they have the option. I mean, if the lump sum works for them, fine. And in fact, we provide money for independent financial counseling. So they get $500 if they want to go to somebody independent to help them make that decision, whether or not, at their point in their lives, whether they should go with the lump sum or whether they should go with a monthly option. But we really are encouraging the monthly option, because if you look at almost any scenario, they will make more, they will get more if they take the monthly amount.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, through you, I just believe my colleague said that the Liberals' Pension for Life would come into existence July 1st, 2018. I think I'd like it on the record, because we are on the record here today, that it's actually 2019.
That's true.
Is that correct, Minister?
1 April, yeah. 1 April 19.
April 119.
Thank you for that correction.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Apologize for the error there. Okay. And as a former educator and teacher, I recognize the importance and the value of education, and I think that what we're offering at this point is much better than before. I know that a lot of money has gone into it since 2015, but can you tell us what's going to change for the education benefits in this next budget?
Well, it offers a lot of flexibility. Again, it's giving the benefit of the doubt to the applicant to say, look, you go and you do what you think is best for you at this point in your life, and the ability to go back to a university, to carry on to do a PhD. Not only does that add to your well-being as a person, it can also help you with your employability. I found it very interesting, the fellow that we spoke to in Vancouver. Because he had been through a heck of a lot, and he had confided in us. Obviously, he's anonymous, but he had PTSD and other issues, and he wanted to study it. He wanted to take it further, so he wanted to do a PhD. And I think after that, what he intends to do is to figure out how to help serve his fellow veterans who are also suffering similar conditions. I mean, that's a pretty great story.
Can I just add a couple things? Going back to one of the earlier questions, when we went back to the Veterans Associations and said, okay, how to move forward on this reestablished lifelong pensions as an option for wounded and injured veterans, many of the associations came to us and said, please don't go back to the Pension Act, for exactly as the minister indicated. It was a cookie-cutter approach. Only those who were most severely injured, like the highest level of injury, received sufficient funding so that they were financially whole. The vast majority of veterans have a very low level of disability, but if they have a significant, say, a back issue, mental health issue, there wasn't enough there to actually keep them financially whole. And that's where even my predecessors mentioned to me, please don't go back to that. But actually create a hybrid. Take the best of the Pension Act and the best of the new Veterans Charter, kind of bring them together and allow you to move forward. And that's what we have been trying to formulate here in this pension for life. And as the Minister said, the pension, the pain and suffering component and the additional pain and suffering component, which is a regular monthly connection between the Government of Canada to that veteran that says, thank you for what you've done, thank you for your service, and we recognize the sacrifice that you have endured for our nation.
Thank you. Mr. Yolfison?
Thank you, Minister and Deputy, for coming. I'd like to clarify something made in an earlier question by my colleague, Mr. Johns. He referenced something from our party's platform, and that there's been criticism that what we gave was not what we said in the platform. I have the platform pledge in front of me right now, which says, and I quote, "We will reestablish lifelong pensions as an option for our injured veterans." Does that say we will reestablish the same lifelong pension plan that existed beforehand? Would any court of law say that that's the same statement?
You asking me?
Yes, yes. What I'm saying is, what I'm saying is, I'm being told that we will reestablish lifelong pensions as an option means yes, yeah. It was just said that statement actually means we will bring back the pension as it was before, that by definition is that statement. Now, is that a reasonable statement, that this statement, we will reestablish lifelong pensions, actually means that by not just simply bringing back the old one is somehow a break of that promise? Or would you say, based on what we've done, that we've kept that promise to reestablish lifelong pensions?
The pension for life is a monthly distributed pension for life.
Thank you. So would you say that we have kept our promise on that?
It would appear to me that it certainly is the case, yes.
Thank you, Minister. Okay. So we've heard concerns from many veterans about the time it takes to access medical records. Being a physician, I know what it's like when I have patients from other provinces who even aren't involved in VAC, sometimes getting medical records, even from a patient's doctor's office to the emergency room. Sometimes takes some time.
Yeah.
So what steps are we taking to close the gap between the Department of National Defense and VAC when it comes to information sharing?
Thanks, Doug. That was the a direct order from the Prime Minister on the day that he told me he'd be swearing me in the next day, was to close the seam. And interestingly, it was something that my brother, who's a lieutenant commander in the Navy and who was acting commandant at the Naval Fleet School in CFB Esquimalt, had said to me months earlier, without either one of us knowing that I'd be here, saying that we had to do something because suddenly he was involved in a lot more human resource issues, and it became evident that people were coming out and they were lost. You had people, Emanuela was referring earlier to, the transition being very difficult. And when you were, and you've heard this from veterans, when you're in a very structured environment for a long period of time, 20, 25 years, let's say, and you know exactly how your day is going to go and where your benefits come from and everything, and suddenly you're thrust out into the world and you don't know, and you've got to reapply for everything, and you've got to go see a new doctor. It just doesn't make any sense. So we call it convergence, as you all know, and that's what we're working on. I would say right now, the Minister of National Defense and I meet about once every 2 weeks on things that we can do to start putting that process into place. I was almost singularly looking at Pension for Life up until Christmas. Now it's the communicating of Pension for Life and bringing it before the House. But it's also convergence right now and backlog. Those are my biggest priorities. And convergence is simply, what we would like to have happen is that a soldier, serviceman, airwoman, would never know would never know that they're moving from one department to another. They would simply be aware of the services and programs that they're entitled to, and that perhaps they're moving over to other services and programs. This does involve some issues with privacy. So, and these were set up with the best of intentions, that, people shouldn't be able to just kind of throw around your medical records, which makes all sorts of sense. And so you have a whole series of legislation and regulations that ensure that people's privacy when it comes to their medical records are held carefully. But in this instance, it doesn't work, because we want to make sure that, it is seamless. So we are working with Treasury Board as well to make sure that those systems are put in place. I mean, we all sign on to, Google's terms and conditions. Maybe that's not the best example these days, but you sign on with terms and conditions, and you say, look, you've permission to use my information. Well, in a much more controlled and secure manner, perhaps within government, we can find something similar, where, early on, perhaps in your military career, you can agree that you are willing to share your military records post-service with Veterans Affairs Canada.
Okay.
Can I also say that our clientele comes to us not only while they're in uniform and on transition, but actually the vast majority come to us after they've released from the Canadian Armed Forces. In fact, about 25% of our clientele come to us while they're still serving, another 25% in that 2 years after they release, and then 50% come to us from about year 2 to year 50 or 60. And so sometimes those records are no longer in the Canadian Armed Forces. They're actually in library and archives. So actually getting all those files together and finding, and then joining them up with a more recent diagnosis is quite a challenge, even over and above the comments about the privacy that the minister mentioned.
All right, thank you. I only have about 10 seconds, so it's probably not enough. So 20. Okay, thank you. Well, so we've heard about the role of caregivers in the day-to-day roles of veterans. And can you speak to any upcoming benefits that might address this role?
Yeah, that benefit starts April 1. It will be paid to the caregiver. It is tax-free, and it is $1,000.
Thank you.
Ms. Wagenthal, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here today. My questions will revolve around your conversation with closing the seam. I had 5 different conversations with veterans who I'm beginning to find where they are in Saskatchewan because they are trying to connect with me. One particular individual who, they're not in Saskatchewan right now, was posted into JPSU waiting for medical release and was told he can't be released, won't be released until everything's in place. Good news. However, and that his contract would not be up till June 2020. His wing surgeon sent confirmation to Ottawa that he was approved for service-related medical release. The report included testimony from the base doctor, the base psychiatrist, his case manager, and his civilian doctor. The response back from VAC, which his doctor could not believe, was more proof is required. Now we're trying to close this seam, and who knows better whether that person that's being medically released from service is released due to service injuries, DND or VAC. And I had this conversation on February 15th with Ms. Elizabeth Douglas, because the Ombudsman had indicated that they recommend that initial release from service, it be clarified from DND as they're released. Is this due to service or not? Her response to my request to have her perspective on was that I'd like to say that VAC believes that this is a VAC function. And then I went on to ask the question, would it not streamline the process, which is what we're trying desperately to do here for these guys and gals, if it was at least deemed as they left that their injury was or was not due to service when they left the armed forces. And she continued to say that she felt it was their responsibility. I'm going to quote one more statement. I said, who would not know better when it comes to serving in the armed forces whether or not that injury that causes release was due to their service, VAC or DND? And right now in her report, she had said the integration of VAC staff with the IPSC has permitted VAC the opportunity to better understand military culture. And I find it very disturbing that we have to find ways for VAC to better understand military culture to deal with an issue that could be taken care of long ahead of them leaving and then taking months. What's slowing them down in getting their VAC services is not knowing what it is that they qualify for. It's being identified as service-related injury. Is this not something, Minister, that you could do immediately to say from now on, when they're being released, VAC will know as they come over, this is service-related injury, yes or no?
Well, I can't say yes or no, Ms. Wagatha, other than to say that, every case being every case. I'm as frustrated hearing that story as anybody would be, save obviously for the people who are actually involved. We can't do this fast enough, and the direction that we are, attempting to go in is, what immediate things can we find that we can start to address right now? Because some of it we're going to get into legislation and regulation and bigger beasts, but I'm not going to let that, intimidate us. We're going to try and find the smallest things that we can do. I'm hearing this story again and again at town halls, and I'm happy to say, just by way of reference, because it's important, but Admiral John Newton, who's been tasked by the Chief of Defense Staff to follow us in these town halls, does attend, and we hear each of these cases.
What is the rationale for it needing to wait for VAC to make that determination?
Yeah.
I know that there are other injuries that come along over time, you mentioned, and I totally get those. But we're talking about when they are released as part of being prepared completely to transition, and yet that one decision of whether or not it's service-related cannot be given to them before they're released.
So first of all, thanks very much for the question, because it is absolutely fundamental. As I mentioned before, about 3/4 of the clientele who come to VAC come after their release. So they have left the Canadian Armed Forces either on retirement or voluntarily, and then come to us at some point down into the future. So one of the key aspects is, are we standardized across the board in terms of attribution of service, non-service? I think it's absolutely terrific that the Canadian Armed Forces are holding on to these men and women until everything is done. So while they are in uniform, they have the best medical care that the country can provide. They have their income for as long as they are staying in uniform, which is absolutely terrific. I can't comment upon an individual case. It would be inappropriate. But keeping in mind that the minister's responsibility under the new Veterans Charter is for service-related injuries, the way it rolls out. And at the same time, the Crown pays for a significant portion of the Service Income Security and Insurance Program, CISIP, which is there, and the key purpose is there for non-service related, and also based upon the program arrangement we have, also is the first payer for both service and non-service. So even if the individual is not, and again, not talking about a specific case, but if their injury are not attributed as to service, then they have the full CISIP program upon which the new Veterans Charter was based.
I know all of this. It's a simple question, though. We're trying to improve the transition process for these people. Mm-hmm. It's a simple determination to change that so that when they leave, they're being removed due to medical reasons. Are those medical reasons due to service, yes or no? So I'll just leave it at that. Quickly, another question. In the budget, the example for lifelong pensions is a particular service member who served for 25 years, the full 25 years, and then suffered a severe injury and was released, and the examples are that scenario. Can you tell me realistically how many of our individuals who are released with 100% disability have that happen after 25 years of service?
Can I ask you to make it short, please? We're out of time.
Well, I would say actually, the bulk of the cases that we see are actually hearing loss and tinnitus. I would say that actually, if I was going to point to anything that would be the driving force behind the flexibility that we wanted Pension for Life to have, it would be PTSD. Because those are cases where something could happen. It can take hold 5 or 10 years down the road, and we wanted to make sure that the system was flexible enough to be able to suit that individual. That was.
Thank you, Mr. Pertina. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. I was in a steel mill the other day and talking to a steel worker and about my job, and he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm on the Veterans Committee, and I'm quite proud of the work that we do." And he said, "Well, I'm a veteran." And I said, "Well, do you have a MyVac account?" And he said, "What's that?" And I honestly, I've had that same similar conversation. So on the push-pull, does the push include reaching out to, can you tell me about that part of it? Because still we have people who don't know that there are things available to them and easily accessible.
Yeah, and I don't want you to think that we're leaving the push only to MyVac. We're not. Although I'm not going to make any sweeping generalizations about what age group uses, apps on an iPad. There are many. We've seen all ages that have gone to and have been attracted to the MyVac account, and we've seen a huge uptick in the number of people who are taking who are opening MyVac accounts.
You are.
Yeah, which is really good. Like quite a lot of uptick. In fact,
60,000.
in excess of 60,000. Wow. Bulk of which in the past couple of years. And it's much easier. I mean, everything's set up. What medical records that are relevant and that you have. I mean, it's all included, and it also leads you directly to where we want you to go, direct deposit and all sorts of things. We keep trying to improve MyVac to keep up with that demand. And keep up with capacity, but it's also to your point, whether it's guided support or case management, it's an attempt to find out your circumstances and then to tell you about what you are eligible for, as opposed to just holding back and wondering, are they going to find out about what they're eligible for? I mean that's the sea change that had to take place, and it can't happen fast enough.
In your opening remarks, you talked about the supplementary estimates in the 145 and 132. So on the grants and contributions, could you just flesh that out a little bit for me, what the 132 million is dedicated towards?
I've got the answer right here for you. The forecast for the disability pension grant decreased due to less eligible war service veterans than originally forecast. This is an example. VAC reallocates this money to programs that require additional funding before seeking new funding from the fiscal framework. So the transfer payment table lists all the grants which require an increase in authority regardless of whether new funding was required, and this is the reason why the total of these grants and contributions exceeds the amount of new funding being requested.
I see. Okay. The Veterans Emergency Fund, that's another situation where knowledge of the fund might be the problem. So generally speaking, how is that working? What is the intake for requests for those kinds of emergency funds?
So again, Chair, ladies and gentlemen, the Veterans Emergency Fund will start on 1st of April.
Right.
In every one of our 37 locations across the country, there'll be people who are delegated to be able to spend those funds for any veteran in crisis. In addition to that, we're setting up a kind of a hotline to be able to work with our partners, which are the Royal Canadian Legion, Vets Canada, Soldiers for Soldiers, Veterans for Veterans, in order to be able to get funding as a bridge to ensure that those veterans who kind of show up on a weekend, in an evening, in the middle of the night, on a Friday afternoon, can at least have shelter, can have some support while we try to figure out who they are. And again, for some veterans, some veterans don't want to be found yet. No. The Minister and I were out in Victoria at Cockerell House, supported by the Royal Canadian Legion, and to see these veterans who, because of the temperate climate of Vancouver Island, many veterans move across the country, go out to the west, and they kind of camp out. And to see these veterans coming in, and some who have been out of the military for many years, and to see, in this case, the Royal Canadian Legion working with VAC, bringing these folks in, putting a roof over their heads while they figure out who they are, then get them into addiction treatment, mental health treatment, vocational rehab, and to see the graduates of the program who briefed the minister was absolutely phenomenal.
But they had to come to that conclusion themselves. They were out, and then they decided when they were ready to come in. It's complicated, and that's not to make excuses. I mean, we have to have the resources available and ready for when they need help. But it's not always easy. And there are triggers with a lot of individuals who veterans who are mentally ill at the time and need help. There are certain triggers for them. So finding them in an environment where there are identifiable military people, where people are wearing uniforms, for instance, could make a situation go from bad to worse. In fact, I've witnessed that myself. We were in a meeting, and I had an individual who was triggered by somebody who was wearing a uniform.
We heard testimony that these guys are well trained to not be found if that's their choice. Thank you.
Mr. Kitchen, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister General, good to see you again. Thank you for coming. We're discussing interim estimates today. And like a business, they're yearly projections that are based on costs and based on our expectations for the next year. So with that said, the government has just announced that it is going to commit our soldiers to Mali. Now, I recognize that most of the budgetary aspect of this, and I assume that prudent analysis was done on this mission. And I also recognize that the budgetary funding should have been, and if I'm assuming it is, will be discussed at the National Defense estimates. However, these soldiers, airmen, airwomen, will be our future veterans. And therefore, there should have been some planning and costing and proactive analysis done for the increased expenses that will occur. And these increases could be in healthcare costs, transition costs, disability costs. God forbid, someone comes home with a death. There are family costs, analysis all factored into this part. We are dealing with issues of PTSD that we've learned about. I suspect there will be concerns about anti-malarial medication issues. Now, we know that the UN basically pays for the personnel while they're there, but it does not pay for the transition for our veterans. And these things will happen immediately. From the moment it happens, they could transpire, and we could have numbers that could be coming back the very next day. And those numbers should be factored in. Now, Minister, I also know, and we all know, that you are Assistant Deputy Minister, and therefore, and you've also indicated to us today that you talk to the Defense Minister weekly. So you should have been at the table, and I assume you were. And as you've told us many times, you have committed to our veterans, so you would have brought these issues up at this table. The Liberals brought us into Afghanistan, and now they're taking us into Mali. And I'm hoping that we learn something from that aspect of it. So where in these figures are they factored in to what the numbers are, how much of those costs, and can you tell us that information in these yearly costs, please?
Well, I would just say, firstly, that obviously our obligations to Mali, as was announced yesterday, are not nearly what we did for Afghanistan. But having said that, we have to be prepared, and I would just remind members that our obligations to our veterans are statutory obligations. So yeah, I mean, we will come back at some point.
But what are the numbers, Minister? How many people, what are the, or not necessarily, just what are the factors that are different in these grants per person per year? So you've got, you're asking for pensions and benefits of $1.2 billion. How much of that are you anticipating to be paid out for our veterans that are being committed to Mali?
Mr. Kitchen, I would just say that we will be ready for those who...
How much of those numbers? Do you know those numbers? Have you asked those numbers? Did you ask those numbers? And if not, why not?
I don't have those numbers handy, but
Can you get us that information?
We will be ready for those who come
Can
back.
you get us that information?
We will be ready for those who come back.
Can you get us that information?
I don't see any reason why we can't.
Okay. So let's move on to another aspect that's within this budget. And I'm wondering if you can give us numbers, because you're not giving me any numbers on anything else, but perhaps you can give us numbers on the education and training benefits. You're basically saying $4.9 million are being projected for that. Mm-hmm. You said to us today in committee that this is a grant. A grant means money up front. So, assuming that your numbers are correct, and a grant of $80,000 per service member for 12 years. So $80,000, and you do the simple math, that amounts to 61 people are going to get this benefit. Are those numbers correct?
So, sir, the costing that we go through is with the Department of Finance. So we rely on the actuaries. And this also goes to your previous question. So the actuaries and the Office of the Chief Actuary actually do the costings for us based upon the best information they have at the time and the projections across the board. In addition to that, we are able, through the quasi-stat, because as the minister indicated, whenever this comes into legislation and approved, it becomes a statutory obligation. And so basically it depends upon the uptake from veterans, whether they be drawing on the education benefit or indeed for injuries. And that's why being able to come back on a cyclical basis through the supplementary estimates, using the quasi-statutory approach that we have with Treasury Board, we're able to revisit and get adjustments as required throughout the financial year.
So how many people do you expect will utilize?
Mr. Johnson, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, in the campaign, and this is to do with the meeting today, there was a promise that the government was going to go to 25-1 for caseworkers per client, and that was a promise that was made. It was sold to veterans, to employees. In fact, it was mentioned several times last year in the budget, but it's not mentioned once this year. And I'm wondering if you've decided to abandon that pledge, because right now, it's my understanding we're around 38 to 39 to 1. And the new veterans, the new offices, which we're very grateful that you've reopened those offices, but in some cases we're hearing it's like 60, 65 to 1. So, I mean, when you've got this amount, and I'm back to this 42.8 million, because again, it's our understanding that you need a double to actually get to this place where we need to get to. And, you know, I don't understand why we're not hiring back the staff that we need, you know, from 2012. So maybe you can explain, have you abandoned that promise? And I don't know, Mr. Elfson, if it's something that can be tested in the court of law. It's just a simple question around a promise. Mm-hmm. Can you answer that? Because that's important.
Just to say, my understanding is we are still working hard to achieve 25-1, and we owe that to veterans. We owe that to our employees. Just to say that the minister and I were out in Edmonton. I had the opportunity to talk to our staff out there. We have some case managers who are in the upper 30s. We have some who are in the lower 20s. What is terrific is that we're able to get really quality social workers, psychologists, and so on who have case management experience. Met with a whole bunch of them, put them through a boot camp, and then slowly increase their caseload in order to take from those who have been around for a while. Now, when we asked for additional folks a few years ago, we had an expectation of below about 10,000 folks who were case managed. For a whole host of reasons, we're north of 12,000 case managed veterans. And so we're actually out there on an active basis trying to hire the right folks, put them through a boot camp, get into the offices, and then cross-level workloads. And this is an ongoing basis. This is tough work. Case management in this kind of business, many of you have worked in communities, this is tough work. And so getting the right kind of people with the right kind of skills is absolutely essential, and then retaining them.
And I would add, too, that, you know, my comment earlier and my opening comments about a push mentality, word has gotten out. And so we do see a much increased demand on our services. We're hoping that the 42 will help us in some way keep up. And I'm happy for the demand in a way, because, I mean, people are calling because they need these services, and, you know, it's our obligation to provide them. But, you know, we have a challenge. You've identified a significant challenge, and that is just to keep up, to make sure that we can provide these services.
Minister, will the government be able to come back and tell us what is needed to get us to 25-1? What is needed to get the backlog to zero, not just for the next 2 years, permanently, so this never happens again? Would the minister be able to come back with those numbers so we know what we need to do? It's the right thing to do that proper analysis and come back and so we can talk about how we're going to get there.
I have a strong suspicion, Mr. Johns, that those numbers are more elusive than we think. But all I can tell you is we are bound and determined to bring it to zero.
Thank you. That ends today's time for testimony. I'd like to thank both of you for appearing today. Walter, General Natenchuk, again, we have a long history. I'd like to thank you. And again, I want to thank you. I hired a veteran in my office that worked under you and trained under you, and I find that veterans like to speak to veterans. So veterans that come into my office and see a vet sometimes end up walking the same road, and they enjoy that. So thank you for that training, and I suggest that all of us as MPs look at vets for our constituents' office and get them back to work. And we'll just recess here for about 5 minutes, and we'll come back. Thank you again. Second part, Department of Veterans Affairs witnesses. We have Mr. Butler, Assistant Director Minister of Strategic Policy and Commemoration, Mr. Doran, Deputy Minister of Service Delivery, and Ms. Stewart, Assistant Deputy Minister, Chief Financial Officer and Corporate Services. So we'll start, and you guys don't have any testimony, so we'll start with questioning. We'll start with the 6-minute rounds, and we'll start with Mr. McComan.
Should we not have testimony?
Usually we don't. If you want to make
Oh,
an
okay.
opening statement, sometimes opening statement, sorry. If that's,
We have no opening statement, so we'll turn right into
just
questions.
happy to be here is your opening statement today, right?
Okay, great. Well, let's get at it. Thanks for being here. I want to refer to my first question lead-in is referring to testimony from a meeting we had with your Director of Field Operations, Mr. Cormier. Is he under your supervision, sir? Okay, so you're his boss. Thank you. I asked him if VAC keeps statistics in terms of veterans' contacts, in terms of how they contact VAC. He said yes. Statistics are kept, whether they come through online, whether they come through my VAC account, whether they come through an office store, one of the offices. And I asked for later in the testimony period, I asked for those statistics as detailed as possible to be presented to this committee by way of channel and by way of location. He thought his answer to that was yes, he would do that. Do you know why the delay and why we haven't got that information? It should be statistics that are kept on an ongoing basis.
I absolutely do not, but I'll follow up on it. But we do have the statistics. We have them by mode, whether it's phone calls or contacts through my VAC account. The only thing that we don't have very specific is the walk-ins to the offices. We don't track that one exactly the same way. But we have case management, adjudications, our phones, and my VAC account, and actually even emails to my VAC account. I actually have some numbers here, but if you've requested that, I'll make sure we get that back to you.
I find it interesting you say you don't keep statistics for people coming into regional offices. You do not.
No, we started tracking, but that's one area that was lacking is the actual traffic.
When did you start?
A few months ago.
Okay, so prior to that, you're saying here today that VAC never tracked the number of people coming into a VAC office?
No, because they usually come in to meet their case management, so we were tracking that. But just people coming in to grab a pamphlet or things like that, we were not tracking that.
When someone comes into a VAC office, I just want to explore this a little deeper with you, if you don't mind, I'm going to drill down here, is when someone comes into a VAC office, typically you would think it'd be a veteran.
Typically, yes.
Most of the time?
It could be a veteran or a family member. I mean, we
Yeah,
have
so
a fair
someone
amount of-
acting on the veteran's behalf.
Yes. It's not only veterans, let's be clear, because family members do come in to request
And you're saying
information.
it's frequent that someone comes in and just says, well, here, all I want is a brochure?
Yeah.
All they want is a brochure?
Well, they want a brochure, they want to understand a certain program. They're not applying for a program. They'll walk into an office, say, "What do you have a certain program?" Or sometimes they come to us and say, "I know somebody that needs help. Can we help them?" And they may not be. I actually dealt with one that in Valcartier not too long ago, where somebody just said, "I have a battle buddy that's not well. Can you guys do something about it?" I mean, that happens.
Right. And you don't track that?
We were not.
Okay. It's interesting because my recollection, having been on this committee in 2008, 2009, 2010, was that those statistics were being kept.
Well, they may have been, and I can't. I've only been here 4 years, so you outdate me on that, sir. So I apologize.
So could you offer a reason, or maybe Mr. Butler could offer a reason why you would stop taking those statistics?
I can't offer you. Mr. Butler, unfortunately, could give you, but I can't offer you a reason. I know when I started asking for the granularity of that, we did not have it, and I've asked for it.
Mr. Butler?
Yeah, look, thank you for that question. To be honest with you, however, that the operations does fall under Michelle, and any changes to data gathering that might have occurred over time, I would not be privy to it. So not on that at that level of detail. My apologies.
Okay, but you will provide what you have.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm surprised you haven't received it yet.
No,
so.
but and this is a good thing that parliamentarians can get is the services of the Library of Parliament. So we'll do some research in terms of when that decision was made and why it was made, etc. We've just heard the minister today say that there's a significant cultural change that he recognized needed to happen at VAC. We have had you here as witnesses over and over again through the years. What is the difference between the promises you've made for the cultural change and what he's trying to make?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Care, compassion, and respect is where we're going and where we are in many places. Notwithstanding some of the examples I heard earlier, and I have to say I was quite upset with that. And I'll figure out who the veteran is and I'll figure out what happened there. That's my area. But I have to say, I've been here 4+ years. There has been a fundamental change when it comes to how our staff deal with veterans. Now, it is not perfect, and I won't. They're individuals working frontline, and things happen. But there has been substantive change when it comes to care, compassion, respect, and actually getting to yes. And that sounds a bit, but how can we actually get the help that the veteran needs when the veteran needs that help? So there's been a lot of stuff done. Now, there's still pockets of areas where, and it's not all in one branch or it's not all in one area, because some people have been doing the same job the same way for, 25 or 30 years, and to try to get them to look at it from a different perspective is not always easy. But we've come a long way in the past 4 years. And many veterans actually tell me that. And when I arrived at Veterans Affairs 4 years ago, I probably had a serious issue or two on a daily basis to contend with. Now I actually get thank you notes from veterans, which I have to say 4 years ago were very rare for getting them.
Can I just stop you there, because my time's limited?
Okay.
Actually, sorry. Mr. Burkina.
Please go on.
So we've done a lot of work on that, but there's still a lot of work to be done. I think the service excellence that was approved by Treasury Board, we used to call it service delivery review. We've moved it into service excellence, is actually inculcating that care, compassion, respect in our staff. And I always challenge my colleague, Mr. Butler, that it's not just the service that has to be service excellence and veteran-centric. It has to start from the policy and move it into service that we can deliver this. And we're working very, very hard on doing that. As an example, last year we pushed out the DA. You didn't have to apply for the increase in your disability award. We actually sent everybody an email through my VAC account or by normal mail to say the money will be in your bank account. And on the third day of the month, because the first and second happened to be a weekend, the money was deposited and automatically. Now, unfortunately, we had a lot of phone calls. People asked us, what is this money for, right? Which killed my stats on the phones for a month. But the reality, the money was there, and that's taken a different approach. Previously, we would have said, come to us, apply, we'll adjudicate it, and we'll get the money to you in a month. When we did the DA change, it was in their bank account. So we are working, but we still have a long way to go because there's still some people that have to come along.
So on the money side, maybe Ms. Stewart, you could help me out with this. How do you actually come to decisions on the amounts of money required? I heard an interesting comment from a lady who you probably all know, but anyway, she said on the caregiver's allowance, there's 700,000 veterans, so there's 700,000 caregivers. So if you do the math, we'll never have enough money. So how do you actually break down the estimates and put them into a document?
Well, let me try to answer you succinctly in that regard. Thank you, Mr. Chair. At Veterans Affairs Canada, we have a very professional, long-standing relationship with the Office of the Chief Actuary. Every year, we reevaluate our client base out 6 decades. I would add that I've been here for 2 years. No two veterans cases are alike. So when we are considering program changes or new programs, we work very closely. We also work with Statistics Canada to understand the statistics for various age demographics in the country that would pertain more to the families of the veterans. The annual review is done by an independent third party every July, and that helps inform some of the changes in programs that occur. As the deputy mentioned, we have the quasi-stats. So whether one person comes forward or 10,000 come forward, we ensure that there is always money to pay for those who are eligible and entitled to benefits and services.
So it sounds like we should be reasonably confident that those numbers are based on
Yes.
solid evidence.
Yes. And I would add, if I may, the question on Molly.
Yes.
In my previous life, my staff and I would do the validation of the incremental costs for operations. And from a temporal point of view, that would be an incremental cost. One would expect to see incremental changes in our client base in Veterans Affairs, whether they be still serving or post-serving when they present themselves to us with their issues. That ties in very well with what I just mentioned about the annual valuation of the client base, because what we're dealing with today is the supplementary estimates C and the interim estimates, which is very focused on this time and place. But as we see Molly, which was just announced last year, as we see the outcomes of that mission, we're going to be adjusting our client base with that information.
A little more time? Mr. Doiron, we've had a number of conversations, and we keep hearing the kind of message that you just delivered, which is things are changing and changing for the good. But then we always open the newspaper, and there's how do you and your staff relate to those kinds of informations? Whether they're right or wrong, they're out there, and that's what the discussion is about, and people tearing up their cards and stuff like that.
Well, thank you for the question. To be honest, I take it a bit hard because my job is to try to get it done right the first time, and unfortunately, we don't always get it right the first time. But I think what happens is we miss the millions of transactions that actually go right. Like, we actually do millions of transactions a year, whether it is on the Veterans Independence Program, whether it is on the DA, whether it is on case management. We do on occasion, but we rarely hear about those. We always hear about those that go wrong, and some of them actually go wrong. It's a reality. It's a very unfortunate reality, one I don't like, but it is, when you have operations, because to me, there's a person attached to every single one of these, right? And that's why I take it seriously. But we have open lines of communication with most of your offices, and most of you send it to the minister's office. That actually lands on my desk. I actually read every single one of them. I have a team that works on them. I probably get 20 to 30 a day. Most of them right now are about, and I'm going to raise it, somebody else is going to hit me with it shortly, but it's about the backlog right now. Most of them are about the backlog. I won't hide. But every once in a while, there's one in there that is more than that, right? And we deal with them. So we take them very seriously. I had a call from somebody 2 Thursdays ago where, this veteran dying of cancer had never come forward to us for anything. And by Friday evening, we had VIP, we had full-time care done for him, an OT assessment, everything done for him, and God rest the veteran's soul, he died on Saturday. But you may say, well, that's a lot of work maybe for, you wonder why. Well, now the widow is entitled to some of our programming. And that's how seriously we do take it. So when one does go astray, we feel, and we try to rectify it.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I want to go back to the $42.8 million. Is there a number that the department asked Treasury for? That it's my understanding that the department asked for double what they got. Can you confirm that?
I wouldn't say it's double. We did ask for more money, but it depends on...
Can you tell me the number?
No, I'm not privy to giving you the number.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Maybe we could request that, Mr. Chair.
I can't provide that
number.
That's discussions with Treasury Board. So
okay.
We did ask for more,
yeah.
And we got the number we got, and we are extremely pleased we got money from government to do this. And we are going to do everything in our power to make make as much progress with this money as possible.
I really believe that. I do have concerns. You know, when we had the minister here and we were trying to get an idea, where did they come up with this number? And, you know, the question I asked the minister, what analysis did they put on, you know, the service delivery to come up with this number? And there's no analysis done. I mean, that amazes me. You know, this is a lot of money, and we've got a huge backlog, and to not have a number. You know, I talked earlier about getting to 25 to 1. I mean, the last budget, it was mentioned all throughout the budget. Now it's not mentioned once. I mean, is the department abandoning that promise? I mean, it seems to me it is, and people just want to know.
No, sir, we're not.
Okay.
I'll give you a very short answer. No, we're not.
Okay, thank you. There's a new Veteran and Family Wellbeing Fund that starts April 1st. Small amount of money, $3 million, to develop new and innovative ways to support veterans and their families by conducting research and implementing initiatives and projects. And we know that in the States, I think, and Mr. Chair, you talked about it as well, the importance of hiring vets so that they're caseworkers. And in the States, I think they're at 30% actually of their caseworkers, frontline, are veterans. And under the Veterans Hiring Initiative and Hiring Act, I think most departments are not really utilizing the Act at the extent that we'd like to see. Is there a target that the department has on rehiring vets, like they've done in the States? They're at 30%. I know Pacific Coast University, a school in British Columbia that is an institute for workplace health, hiring people, training them for return to work. You know, they put forward a proposal, and there's a gap. There's not a lot of money there for this, and I think it's really important. And as the department understand the significance of it, we know that we need, you know, vets often need that person they can trust, someone they've served with. Maybe you could speak to that.
Veterans hiring is absolutely at the fore in the program in Veterans Affairs Canada. We have one side of the program that focuses on the hiring of veterans in the private industry. There's an area within my own branch. It's called the Veterans in the Public Service Unit. It was created together with the Public Service Commission and Public Services Canada. There has been a pledge of several ministers and deputies to increase the number of veterans in the public service. It is undertaking a pilot at this moment. It's gaining traction, and in fact, we had a job fair at the Invictus Games last year that was very successful. So the next phase will be reaching out to regions across the country.
Right.
And making more efforts in that regard.
Ms. Stewart, and I really appreciate it, is the government looking at setting targets, though? Because I think when we set targets, we have an opportunity to try to meet those targets or not. I know that, again, Pacific Coast University applied for a pilot project proposal to work with VAC to try to move this forward, and they were denied, directed to this fund, which is really a startup fund, if you call it. $3 million isn't a lot of money to do many things. Is the government looking at setting clear targets so that they can get there? And what would the number be that the department would like to see?
I can't speak to that number. I can tell you that the linkages with the universities is something that we are engaged with. And I wouldn't wish to speculate, but I can say that we do have percentage targets within the federal public service.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Can you get those numbers to us so we
Absolutely.
have numbers of what we're looking at so that we can monitor that?
And if I may add, it's centered primarily on the statutory hiring requirement of medically released vets, and also on the regulatory and all other vets. But we take the Veterans Hiring Act very seriously in that regard.
Great. We've got a lot of veterans that are becoming homeless with the housing crisis, certainly on Vancouver Island. You know, I've got a veteran in the Comox Valley, William Webb. He's got a family. He's looking at hitting the street, and there's a Veterans Emergency Fund that you talked about. Can you elaborate about that fund? Because we're challenged finding out more info about it.
Thank you for the information. The Veterans Emergency Fund allows us, I actually think in the 2017 budget, I think I've told this committee before, this was the one that really got me excited. And most people often, like when you talk about billions and all that, once you talk about $1 million a year, why would that catch my attention? It's because that actually will allow us to do stuff directly on the ground. As the Deputy Minister mentioned earlier, when a veteran comes to the office, we have new programs starting in April 1st. But prior to that, all our programming were based on a service relationship. So we had to adjudicate. We had to figure out if your injury was service related before we could help you. Not to say we wouldn't work with the, the Legion and everybody else, but this fund, it doesn't matter. So now if somebody knocks on the door and says, I'm homeless, I don't know where to go, we can actually use this money, working with our partners, but put them into, the Grand Holman, I think it's called in Calgary, where we often put people up, or other hotels where we need to, or get them a meal, or help them immediately.
Great. We look forward to hearing more about it, so we can get that.
6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for coming. I guess the first question I have, and I don't know who's best to answer this. Now, as you know, the Veterans Affairs Center offices have been opened across the country. How has that improved, or has that improved the ability to provide services for veterans? Has there been value added to this?
Thank you for the question, sir. Mr. Chair, absolutely, it has improved services. People can now go to a local office and get the services locally instead of having to travel. So, I mean, I was quite happy to open them, and we added one, and they're doing great.
Okay, thank you. Now, do you know what would be the expected payout totally? I'm sorry, this may have been answered. I'm getting numbers mixed up when they're coming around. So I apologize if it's been answered. But so for the pension for life annually, for 2019, 2020, do we have an estimate of how much Veterans Affairs would have to pay for that? What that amount will be?
We do. Our chief financial officer will get the number, but we do have a number.
Okay. While it's being looked for, perhaps another a question I'll put while we're waiting for that answer. Now, the career impact allowance that it previously had, this was a taxable benefit. The new additional pain and suffering compensation, this is going to be tax-free. Is there an estimate as to what that price difference will be? As in, how much potential revenue would that cost the government to do that?
I'm sorry, I'm still focused on your first question on the pension for life.
Okay, if you have that, good.
I can't discuss cash yet, but the public amount in the investment for budget 2018 is approximately $3.6 billion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so in regards to the other question, like we were saying, if the old event was taxable, this new event is not taxable. Has there been any? Does anyone know what kind of figure that would be of the amount of that tax that would have been paid under the old system that's just not being paid now?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do work with CRA and the Department of Finance on all the costings that go into the pension for life calculations, and we do have those amounts identified.
Okay. Do we know what those are right now, or can they be discussed?
I'm not at liberty. We're still deliberating with the Treasury Board Secretariat, so I can't speak to those at this time.
All right. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I wonder, Mr. Chair, if I could just add to that, just to clarify it. So for pension for life, there are three basic components now of the pension for life program. The first is the pain and suffering award. That is non-taxable. It's a tax-free benefit. The second component is the additional pain and suffering award for the most seriously disabled veterans.
Yeah.
That is non-taxable. And the third element is the new income replacement benefit, which is an economic benefit. It will be taxable. So I think in order to have your question answered, and we would have to look at that, it would have to break down those elements to better understand or to better clarify what you're seeking. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Now, in regards to changing gears just a bit here, in regards to the military family resource centers, are they available to vets who are not medically released, or is this strictly a program for vets who are medically released?
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So the Military Family Resource Center is the new program that will roll out. It will be available to medically releasing families, so members and their families. That's who it is targeted at.
All right. Would it be, now there are veterans who are not medically released, but later might develop problems that, either physical health or mental health problems that manifest themselves well after release, a non-medical release, but is attributed to service. Would this be available to these veterans and their families as well?
Yeah, once they're medically releasing, but at this point, if they have a condition with us, they will. And the MFRCs, let's be honest, these are not-for-profit. We're providing them money, and they've been very clear to us that they don't plan on turning anybody away. We were quite clear, it's for medically releasing, but when I met with the associate, this group, and they're a little different everywhere, and if you've never visited them, you should if you have one in your riding. They're a little different everywhere you go, but they've been very clear to us. They're there to help veterans and their families, and they will support veterans and their families. I'll give them a little pitch here, because I know we've said medically releasing. They said they show up at the door, we'll help.
Great. Thank you very much.
6 minutes.
I've been hearing for a long time, and even you just mentioned it, that mostly veterans will not be turned away if they ask for support. Let's just say that the budget has been, let's say they need something in a specific area, and the finances for that have been reached, they've reached maximum capacity. Would they be turned away at that point, or would they find other ways to support these veterans?
The MFRC would find a way, or they would contact us, see if we can help them. They do that on occasion, and we've helped if we can, but they've been quite clear that they're there to help the veteran families. And let's not forget, most bases where these are situated, or areas where they're situated, also have not non-profit, non-public funds that they can, the military will help on. So the MFRC, we funded some money, but the military is funding also, and they're quite innovative and getting some money, and they're there to help.
Okay, thank you. Can you also talk about other service delivery improvements that are going to be implemented at this point going forward in the new budget? Because I know that we've already improved quite a bit in the last couple of years, but I'd like to see what the differences are specifically for budget 2018. Well,
there's 7 mandate letter items that are coming on board on April 1st, 2018. And the career transition services and the education benefit is one that we've talked a lot about here, where, it's going to be online, and let's just talk about CTS, where a veteran will be able to work with an advisor and help them get some employment somewhere. So we're working on that. And that's going to be very innovative in the way we're doing it, and it's going to link with the education. But beyond that, I think, the 7 stuff we're bringing in, that they're all, and you've all heard about them, but we're also doing a lot of work on the operational side. We're trying to remove as many barriers as possible on the adjudication side. It's still a complex program, but we're trying to facilitate that. We're trying to eliminate some of that. We're working with the various, with our friends at CAF, our partners, on transition, on medical health records. How can we ensure we get the health records in a timely fashion? So all stuff to improve the services to our veterans. Some stuff can be done quick, some stuff will not be done quick. I mean, there's privacy issues with health records, and we're now working through that, but there's a real openness with our colleagues at CAF now to actually do this electronically. And so, I mean, I could go on, but I know time is limited, so I'll be quiet. But.
Okay. And thank you very much for your answer. And lastly, what have we done in order to improve the service for veterans who find themselves in remote or rural areas? Has there been any improvement recently?
Yes. We are now going to the 3 territories on a rotational basis. That has been actually quite successful. We didn't we weren't sure what the demand would be, and the numbers are they don't sound like much. You know, maybe 14 in Iqaluit. We now have case management, but the reality is it's 14 getting help now. We're now exploring a second tier to this, and about doing Northern Quebec and Northern Labrador, which you know, as you look at the territories, they're also up there, and how can we serve those communities? And we have to remember that we have rangers that actually work up north and are entitled to some of our programming. It's a bit of a touchy group, you know, what they're entitled and not entitled to, but you know, they are entitled. So on a monthly basis, I have a team that goes up to, you know, Whitehorse, Yellowknife, Iqaluit. They alternate, and it's actually been going quite well. And we have a lot of people, and we work with the Legion of Service Canada, and they publicize it. So when we arrive, the appointments are made, but we still take walk-ins. And actually, the numbers are higher than we anticipated. They're not but they're higher than we anticipated.
Okay, and do I have time? Okay, so you had mentioned before that CAF has been more open to working with VAC in order to improve service and the transfer of files or information. Can you explain to us a little bit how and why that change has come about?
You would have to ask CAF, but I think it's just an understanding of where the delays are occurring, and you know, they want to make sure their members and their people are getting it. But I also think we're doing a lot of work in transition. I know you've had General Meisner here, and I actually am spending a lot of time with General Meisner myself to better understand transition, because for VAC, transition often starts when you have your permanent category. However, there's a whole process before that, and that's the part we're learning a lot more about, and we're going to be collaborating in that realm, and that's where things like the health records is coming up. Diagnosis from doctors on the VAC side, on the CAF side. Often they say sore foot. They don't give a diagnosis. When it comes to our place, we can't give you a disability award based on a sore foot. We need to know what that is. So we're working with the Surgeon General to sort of make sure that the doctors write a diagnosis. With a diagnosis, I can now give you a disability award. Without a diagnosis, it's a sore foot. Right? And we have to remember, it's a disability award. It has to be permanent. And we're working much closer together now to sort of line that up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ms. Wagenthal, 6 minutes.
Thank you. Good to see you again. Mr. Dorian, we had a conversation last time around with estimates in regards to advertising funds of $2 million. I know you're a busy guy. And it's split between commemoration and mental health, and then we went on to have a conversation, how much was mental health, how much was commemoration. You were going to get that number to us. It was in response to my concerns around the mefloquine issue and the diagnosis with that, and alerting our veterans that this may be a causal scenario for them. So could you, I don't believe that we've received that in looking back in our records.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am aware that the department did provide a response, and
Okay.
I will read this. It is in response to a question. I agreed to provide the committee with the amount of new advertising funds devoted to mental health.
Okay.
Veterans Affairs currently plans to spend $100,000 in fiscal year 2017-18 and in 2018-19 on advertising mental health services. We also plan to profile mental health during general services advertising campaigns over the next 3 years. We have a healthy outreach renewal initiative surrounding communications, and we use a number of media
Could you then
venues.
send that to our new clerk as again, just so that we have
Will
it on
do.
record?
Yep.
That would be great. That would be great. Thank you.
you.
In talking to this individual that I had mentioned previously, I'm not comfortable giving out his name at this point in time. I hope we all understand that, correct? One of the things that he also mentioned on the base that he is on is this last Christmas, there were 6 suicide attempts. 5 of them succeeded. And the struggle is the backlog of people going for medical care, and they basically just get told takes extra sick days. One of them literally got person to person taken to where they needed to be, and that's the one that did not take their own life. So again, I appreciate that we need to do more on the whole awareness of mental health and doing better with that. So I had also asked another question previously of Ms. Elizabeth Douglas in regards to a committee report in 2015, Continuum of Transition Services. And it was made clear that it can be very difficult to reach reservists after their services come to an end. And in 2016, in response to a question our colleague Ms. Romanato posed, this answer was stated by a co-witness, Ms. Pellerin, who said, the group we're not so successful with in terms of reach is the non-medically releasing reservist group. As part of the Seamless Transition Task Force work that's getting underway, this is one group we'll be focusing on in terms of how we can better reach and serve them, make sure they're successful in their transition. And that was in the beginning of June 2016, so I assume this study's done. Approximately 5,000 reservists leave each year, and I had asked how many were being contacted per year through this transition, and she was going to get back to me with that, and I haven't heard that as well. Is that information available?
It should be, because I have the numbers of reservists that are leaving on a yearly basis, and I have how many are leaving for, and it is approximately 5,000. That is pretty consistent. I mean, it varies, but it's close. And I do have the number of medically releasing in that, and we would absolutely contact those.
Okay, so those are the ones that they are contacting for a transition review. You would have that number?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I do want to clarify, though, and we do have those numbers, but I do want to clarify, reservists, by their nature, are more difficult. Like
Yes.
if you're, and without getting into classes, I know the military are looking at it, but if you're a Class A, so you're coming on Thursday nights and maybe a Saturday here and there, you actually can decide at any point to leave.
Yes.
And we're not always informed of that. And we're working very hard with CAF, the reserve leadership, to find a way to make sure we're told. But the person comes in on Thursday night, gives their kid in, and decide to go work in Fort Mac or somewhere else in the country. We're not always advised of that, right? There's a difference there with certain
But
of these.
this study was starting in 2016, so I'm just wondering if there's results from that we could.
If you can provide me more information on that study to make sure I
Okay.
provide you the right stuff, I think it's a
Okay.
transition
Yes.
study, but if you
Okay.
can provide, so
Thank you. Another quick question here. Well, I don't know how quick it'll be because we ask it often, and I'm hearing about it again. The whole issue around medical records. And of course, my perspective is in agreement with the Ombudsman that we should be providing the information to VAC when they are medically released. The reason for that medical release is or isn't service related. And in the information that I have from the analyst, if you are going to be leaving and as a member you request your medical records, you can get them before leaving the service. But afterwards, if you've left, the request then goes out, but your records go to VAC, not to you. Is that correct? Do they also go to the individual? And I've been told that they only can request 10 pages at a time. Is that accurate? Because I've asked that and I haven't heard back.
okay, you would have to ask the Canadian Armed Forces. That's their records. Once you leave the Canadian Armed Forces, after 1 year, we go to the Library and Archive to get your record. It does not come automatic to the VAC, but what you can release and the process, you would have to ask that to the Canadian Armed Forces.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Sampson, 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for your for being here today and sharing the information that that we continue to try to drill deeper to get better understanding, so that we can as well advocate and support our veterans. One thing I would like to say is that the advertising that I've seen on Facebook and other places through VAC has been very, very positive. And I'm getting a lot of positive feedback, and I'm using it as well to share with my veterans. So that's something I did want to share. This is important. In hearing some testimony, we're getting a lot of feedback about veterans having to repeatedly prove their illness when they make new applications. Have we made improvement, and how much so, and how quickly?
Thank you for the question, sir. We have made some improvements. I don't think the department, and look, I'm the service guy, so I'm going to point the finger at myself. I don't think we've done enough yet. We're bound by legislation, and we have to ask the questions we ask. However, with the oncoming of Pension for Life, we're actually relooking entirely how we're going to do this, and to do it in a more modern way. But notwithstanding that, we're actually looking at the process and to try to eliminate the need for pension medical examinations. The need to, you will always have to explain how your injury was caused, and you will always need a diagnosis. Okay, that's the legislation. But what we're trying to eliminate is all those other steps that are attached to it. And it's a slow process, but we're going.
I appreciate that. Some veterans are saying it should be, I mean, that information should be tracked, and it should exist. And you should just have to put a check mark in the box and say, check my file, WK6, and it should be there. I mean, I'd like to see, I know you said you're going to work on that improvement. I'd like to see a plan in the next 6 months of how we're going to see improvement in that area, and what are our objectives to make that happen. I mean, the transition is what's really causing veterans a lot of headaches. And a little bit like Mrs. Wagenthal mentioned, I'm also of that same opinion that why can't D&D just make the assessment, the service-related injury? What do you object to that? Do you have a problem with that? And to what extent?
I do have and I'm on the record here, so I'm not going out on a limb. I disagree with the ombudsman at CAF because I think 25% of them come out of the Canadian, our clients, our veterans come out of Canadian Armed Forces, 75% come after. And you would want to have you want to have a consistent way of, you don't want one person doing adjudication one way and another group doing another way. Now you come into 2 or 3 different class of veterans. That said, I do think the doctors at CAF, and that's what we're working with them very hard, should be doing a diagnosis of saying this is the injury, and if they do a CF98, your check mark you're talking about, we're into a different realm. But often they don't fill out CF98. Sorry, it's a form when you got injured. I have a nephew that's in the Canadian Armed Forces, and I asked him about it. He's a pilot, and he told me he wouldn't fill it out unless he actually could not report to duty. So there's still that mentality. But if they do the diagnosis, the CF98, our job is way easier at the other end.
So to continue on that flow, if you want, or that theme, which is so important, some people are saying that we should join CAF and VAC when it comes to transition. So that way there you can't blame Charlie Brown, and you can't tell or question the other department. I mean, it's obvious that everybody seems to say it would help. Do you see that as a possibility of improving?
Sir, I will not comment on that. That's a political decision, and it's a machinery of government decision, and I think that's a question to be asked at
okay.
For politicians to have that debate, not for a public servant to comment on.
Absolutely. I just thought I should put the question on the table. Anyway, moving to the next question about cultural change, and you made some good points about care, compassion, and respect, and moving forward in that area. And you did say there are still, you said there's still pockets of areas where there's lack of improvement. Can you help me understand what they are? Can you define that a little deeper?
Absolutely. I think we still have, in adjudications, it's much better, but we still have some areas that were trained under an older regime and still really think the test is higher for them, and we're working on that, meaning they want to really demonstrate, because it is public money and they see it that way and they want to be careful. So we're working on that.
So should MPs with their staff be sending you names of individuals that seems to be causing a lot of stress? Because I'm hearing in certain cases that nothing has changed in the last 2 years as far as service. And I know anybody can make comments, and I'm not pointing fingers, but is there any way we can? Because you just said there are some that have been there for a long time and they have an older culture and whatnot. Is there something we can do to try to help you understand or see who they are and how we can improve it? Because it is an issue, and so be it. It is, that it's someone there a long time, but the veteran is in need today, not tomorrow.
Sir, Mr. Chair, you're always at and you have my email actually, so we've communicated often, so you're always at liberty of sending me that information or other MPs. The reality, though, let's always be careful. Sometimes no is the right answer, and it is not a popular answer, but it is the right answer. Not that we don't want to give something to somebody, but sometimes the Act does not permit us to do that, and that I know often because I do receive all your emails from your offices. They do come to me, and some of those answers is the person's just not entitled, and if the Act doesn't allow me to pay something, it's illegal for me to pay it. Whatever I believe is irrelevant, it's illegal. So, but if there is I would assume in your case it's a case manager in the Halifax greater area or Sydney that is causing you angst, you can always send me a note.
Thank you. Mr. Kitchen, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see you all again. I'm going to be very quick because I have very limited time. The minister talked about a push model, which he's pushing, and you're implementing this push model. So what I'd like to know is, what are the consequences when an agent provides the wrong information? Who's responsible for that? Because that wrong information, providing the wrong forms, now leaves that veteran out to dry. What happens? Is there a firing? Is there disciplinary action?
There's a lot of stuff that could happen. If this is an honest mistake, it's a learning experience. If this is a recurring...
But if it's a learning experience for a veteran who's given their life to their country, and all of a sudden you're going to say, oh, we're just learning from... there's got to be some consequences.
And there is. And I mean, we actually deal with performance on a daily basis. So it depends on the severity. It depends on the issue. And at the end of the day, VAC is responsible. So we take the actions.
My colleague touched on one of my other questions, Mr. Sampson, and it was basically dealing on the issue of the pain and suffering aspect of the pension for life. And in that, we talk about the benefit amount will be continued to be tax-free, and the method of rating the degree of disability unchanged. So now, I agree with my colleague. If all of a sudden someone's lost their legs, there are certain issues. They should not have to be able to turn around every year and say, my legs grew back. If there are certain conditions where certain conditions that can happen that they can recover from, I get that, but there should be a box that they should be able to tick and say, this is it, I don't have to prove that year after year after year.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll respond to that question. Thank you for that. I think that there may be some confusion over that. It's really quite interesting because there was quite a controversy here over the last year or two where a veteran came forward and said that they're asking me every year, did I lose my legs? That really wasn't actually Veterans Affairs Canada, number one. It was in another context. But we do have a Veterans Independence Program and treatment benefit program where we do try to, at one point, we reached out every year to do an assessment, really for the benefit of the veteran, to say, has your condition worsened? Is there more treatment? Is there anything more we need to do? Then there was pushback to say, well, you're constantly reaching out to question it, and there was a decision taken, well, let's stop doing that. And the fact of the matter is that by doing that, some veterans were not getting the care that they really needed because their conditions were changing. So the long and the short of it is that I really don't think that we're doing that today in that context. There would be, certainly not in the pension pain and suffering award context, there would not be a scenario where we would be asking them to verify that they've lost their legs, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Johns, 1 minute we're down to. That's all I can spare you.
Great. Can you just clarify, or is it true that the education and training benefit provides $133.9 million over 6 years, or $22 million a year for 6 years?
Yes, I've got the 133.9 education benefit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I just want to clarify that the Liberal commitment was for $80 million a year to create a Veterans Education Benefit Fund. Lastly, you talked about, Mr. Elson asked you a question about the difference between the old pension and the new pension, and you said it's at Treasury, those figures. Can you send those figures back to the committee so that we have a chance to look at the differential? And his question's on the record, so if we could get those answers, that would be fantastic.
Will do.
Great, thank you.
That ends our testimony. I'd like to thank you all for appearing today, and thank you for all that you do to help our men and women, veterans that have served. Motion to recess, Mr. Sampson, all in favor, carried. Thank you.